I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. I wanted to address some of the comments I've had on my YouTube page over the last couple of weeks. And these are kind of reoccurring comments that I'll get from people. And listen, I realize when I set up this blog, I'm not going to reach everybody with it. Some people will pose some very good questions on there, and I'll do my best to try and respond to them. Although keep in mind, I've said it before, I'm very busy. As people know, I do my best to try and answer some of the better questions I see there. But many of them, I just know I'm not going to reach these people. So I'm not going to waste my time bandying back and forth in the comment section on YouTube. I've got better things to do with my time. But here's a couple reoccurring ones, so I'll address them here. I had a few people recently say, Owen, you're so bullish on Vancouver real estate, which I am. If you've been watching my blog here, there's a reason why I'm bullish on Vancouver real estate. It's made me a whole lot of money over the last 32 years. I'm also very bullish and long on all the Canadian bank stocks as well. So if you read my book, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, not to brag, Vancouver real estate made me a multi-millionaire by the time I was in my mid-30s, and I didn't really do anything special. I worked hard, spent less than what I earned, and as soon as I got enough money, kept shoveling it back into buying more real estate and continued on the road up there. I still see lots of opportunity over the next 20 or 30 years in Vancouver real estate as well, even more so in a lot of cases than what I saw 15 or 20 years ago. So here's a couple of the things. They'll say, you're so bullish on Vancouver real estate, I think your judgment is clouded. This bull run we've had, or this influx of Chinese buyers, it's not going to continue. That's the only thing that's propped this market up. Low interest rates, those are going to start going up. The market is headed for a crash. You're so positive, you're leading sheep to the slaughter and that kind of thing. I couldn't disagree more. If you've watched my blogs for a while, you know that I keep a pretty balanced approach here. I'm the first one to tell people that Vancouver real estate does not go up in a straight line. The bull run we've had here for the last 4 years is unprecedented, and it is not sustainable. I have lived through these. Remember, I walk the walk on my blog here. I've been in Vancouver real estate for over 30 years. I've been through lots of corrections, and I've been through lots of bull runs. Nothing quite as dramatic as the one we've just had and the price increases we've seen, but they're all going to come to an end sooner or later. But the thing that I want to stress to people though is when we do get the correction, and it's not if we get a correction, it's when we get this correction, and whether that's 5% or 10% or 15%, who knows? There's a lot of variables. I've blogged about it many times before. But keep in mind, it's not going to be a result of lack of demand or lack of interest or lack of popularity in owning Vancouver real estate. It's going to be artificially taken down here by the provincial government and by the federal government. Now, they've already been trying to cool this market for years. It started 3 years ago with Ottawa tightening the mortgage requirements. I've blogged about this. They just keep tightening the requirements to get a mortgage. Hasn't done really too much so far. We've got another new wave of them coming out in January, which I've also blogged about. But they've also announced, of course, the foreign buyers tax 18 months ago. Didn't do too much either. As a matter of fact, if you go onto the Vancouver Sun right now, I saw a headline article there yesterday, November 1st, saying that the new stats on the foreign buyers is that those numbers are going up. There are now more foreign buyers purchasing again, which does not surprise me at all. First off, the foreign buyers are a very small minority of the buyers anyways. These are the ones that are subject to the 15% foreign buyers tax. The vast majority of the buyers I have, the Chinese buyers that I have, and I've talked about it before, I have not sold a detached home to anyone but a Chinese buyer pretty much over the last 5 years. They're not foreign buyers. They have their permanent residency status or their Canadian passport. And I've also blogged before too that we are minting thousands and thousands of these new Chinese investors via the Quebec Investor Program. They put $750,000 into the Quebec government for 5 years, have to live in the province for a year or two, and then they're off to the West Coast here. So, those numbers, when we do get the correction, as I say, it's going to be a result of the provincial government and the federal government putting restrictions in place, trying to curb demand. But we all know, you can't curb demand. Demand is always going to be there for living in Vancouver, and it's growing every year. The correction we're going to get is going to be a result of a short-term fix where they're going to put another unwielding tax or more mortgage restrictions or whatever. Who knows? The NDP government is going to announce some new curbs in their budget in February. They're throwing out things like maybe they'll ban foreign ownership altogether. Maybe they'll increase the foreign buyers tax to 30%. These are going to be temporary band-aids. What's going to happen is that other cities as well are going to start putting in these restrictions or taxes on foreign buyers. Eventually the playing field will level. They'll all have those taxes, and then they'll all come back into Vancouver in droves because this is their number one destination. I don't think they're going to be wanting to live in Quebec very long. So it'll all level out in the end, in my opinion. But demand continues to grow. Now, let me just give you a couple more anecdotes here as well. Some of the buyers I've had, as I've said, this year, the vast majority of my buyers are not foreign buyers. They have their permanent resi status, Canadian passports. They're not subject to the foreign buyers tax. And as I say, even the ones that are starting to increase again. The other thing though is, I think a lot of people would be surprised at how many buyers I get in downtown Vancouver condos from other parts of Canada. Now, I've had several buyers from Eastern Canada this year. Here's a classic one right here, and I've had many of these. Guy in his early 60s, him and his wife have spent most of their adult life in Ontario. Kids are grown up, out of the house, takes early retirement, sells the detached house in North York, buys a condo downtown Vancouver, banks a bunch of money, and he's going to live the West Coast lifestyle. He's going to spend his spring and summers in Vancouver, and then late fall and winter he's going to spend in Palm Springs, Phoenix, Arizona, or Hawaii. And this guy was telling me that for the last 15 years, when he was living in Toronto, he would go down to Tampa and Sarasota in the wintertime. But he got his taste of Palm Springs and Phoenix and Hawaii and was absolutely blown away by how superior it is, which doesn't surprise me. I've heard this story before. Nothing wrong against Florida, but my God, I mean, Southern California and Hawaii are quite a bit nicer in my opinion. So these are the type of buyers I'm getting. I had another one from Quebec as well. Same thing, sold the detached house in Quebec, bought a condo in downtown Vancouver, is going to live the West Coast lifestyle. I just recently had some buyers from Mission who own acreage, own a large house out in Mission, that are buying a pied-à-terre, a second small apartment in downtown Vancouver that they're going to use on the weekends. They're going to use it to go to a sporting event or concerts or restaurants as a little vacation property. So the demand is continuing to grow to own a piece of downtown Vancouver real estate. And the correction we do get, as I say, in most cases, is going to be a result of some more unwielding taxes that the provincial or the federal government are going to lay down on us. But these are temporary band-aids, in my opinion. All you have to do, if you really want to get a feel for where Vancouver is headed and the demand and the type of buyers that are coming into the city now, is go on to several Vancouver websites that will showcase some of the new developments that have just been approved by the City of Vancouver. So they've all been approved. If you drive by the sites in the West End or Cole Harbour or Yaletown, they'll have the development permit signs up, and over the next 12 months they'll be tearing down the existing buildings. And they'll have a rendering of the new tower that's going up. These are ranging between 33 and 55 stories tall. They all have one thing in common. They are all luxury units, starting at $1,300 or $1,400 a square foot for a lower unit facing the alley, up to well over $2,000 a square foot. So the demand is there. The money is there. The flows of money that are coming in for a guy that can drop $3 or $4 million on an apartment are there, and they're increasing. And listen, I don't see that stopping anytime over the next 15 or 20 years. Yes, there will be some ebbs and flows in the demand and the interest. Some of that will have to do with the Canadian dollar. If the dollar drops and goes down, it makes it more affordable for American buyers or buyers from outside North America in most cases. When the dollar's high, that might slow demand a little bit. The taxes, whatever's going to come online with more foreign buyers taxes, more restrictions on mortgages, that will also have short-term effects on the demand. But in the long term, when someone asks me, are you bullish on Vancouver real estate? Every bit as much as I was 30 years ago, maybe more. And just one final thing, I had a lot of comments on the UBS blog I did a couple of weeks ago as well. And, you know, I had said in there that, you know, one of the questions I would love to ask the UBS on their housing correction that they see coming, which, you know, calling for a price correction in Vancouver now in these late innings is pretty funny, really. I mean, it's almost like saying I think it's going to rain sometime this winter in Vancouver. I mean, come on. Of course it's eventually going to get a correction here. But UBS has been crying boy who cried wolf for the last 10 years. You know, unfortunately, some people listen to these guys and probably sold their house or decided to wait off on buying it. You know, the market's gone up 150% since then. If we get a 15 or 20% correction, they've still missed out on 120% gain. It's crazy. Not to mention the fact that they spent $25,000 a year in rent to rent a one-bedroom condo in Yaletown. So they've dropped $150,000 on rent in the last 6 years. But you know, the one thing that I would ask UBS, the only question that matters really, would be what is their prediction if someone were to buy a Yaletown condo today as their principal residence? All the capital gains are going to go to you tax-free. It's the only tax shelter we get and why everyone should own their principal residence. Blogged about it many, many times here. Watch my blogs on it. You bought it today. What do you think, UBS, that Yaletown condo is going to be worth 25 years from now after you paid off the mortgage? Isn't that all that matters? When you buy your principal residence, who cares what it does in the short term? It's your house. It's a roof over your head. It's shelter. It's tangible. That's all that should matter when you're buying your home. What do you think it's going to be worth 25 years from now? Now, I went on there and I said, conservatively, it's going to be worth $2.2 to $2.5 million. And I'm using conservative numbers there. But I had some guys on YouTube, of course, say, you're ridiculous, worth $2 million or $2.2 or $2.5 million. Now, thank you for the couple of commenters that went on there and took 2 minutes, went on to Google, looked up an annualized rate of return calculator that you can get off Google, whereas you plug in the purchase price today, $700,000, let's say, for that Yaletown condo, number of years, 25 years, and what the price would be at the end, let's say $2.5 million. That turns out to about a 4.5% annualized rate of return. So hardly stratospheric at all. Inflation's running at 2 or 3%. See, a lot of people don't realize the magic of compounding. It's the 7th or 8th wonder of the world if you talk to Warren Buffett. How when you buy a stock, collect the dividends, reinvest the dividends, and just let it snowball, what that can do for your returns. But a $700,000 purchase price today to $2.5 million is only about a 4.5% return. Easily achievable. As a matter of fact, we've seen 4.5 and 5% return month over month for the last 2 years in places like New Westminster, let alone annually. So, but a lot of people are taken aback by that. They can't believe that if you were to buy a condo today and 25 years later it would be worth 2.5. That's just barely keeping pace with inflation, and real estate will always keep pace with inflation and then some. Not in lockstep, but if you give it 20 or 25 years or 30 years, it's going to blow you away. That's the only thing that should matter to people, is what you buy it at today and what it's going to be worth when you pay that mortgage off in 25 years. Anything in between, it shouldn't really matter to you all that much. But my golden rule is always 8 to 10 years. You buy it today, 10 years from now, you can feel pretty rest assured that that unit will be worth more than what you paid for it. Not to mention the fact that the gain is tax-free, and you've saved yourself. If you're paying $25,000 a year right now to rent a typical Vancouver condo, which is one bedroom, you know, you're shelling out $200,000 every 8 years, and I'm not even basing that on any rent increases. You know, the typical person is going to probably spend about $1 million if he wants to live and rent in Vancouver over the next 25 or 30 years. $1 million. That'll buy an awful lot of real estate and awful lot of free capital gain as well. As always, if you haven't joined my YouTube blog, please do. I'm Owen Bigland. I'll see you next week.